Welcome everyone, my name is Jacob. Thank you for joining me, and this is Hunt Detail, an introspective examination of some of the nuance and detail within hunting gear and hunting woodsmanship, particularly focused on big game hunting, whitetail deer, elk, etc. And it's getting to be October, the middle of October exactly, and I recently had the opportunity to fill my archery tag on a solid 8-point buck. Nothing that you're going to see on anybody's wall or anything like that, but I'm really pleased with him. It's, I guess, the 5th or 6th year in a row where I filled my buck tag on a really solid buck, a mature buck, and in several years I've killed multiple bucks. So I'm really pleased with that streak. And in this scenario, it was really all about finding the feed tree and setting up accordingly. I knew that there was a couple, sort of this oak flat that had some white oaks and some pin oaks, and as well as red oaks, that I had a feeling that was being hit as sort of a staging area for several deer. And I set up in a way where it was an east wind, and so that east wind was coming from the feed trees, the oak flat, towards me. I was down in a sort of a creek bottom, a draw, if you will, more of a draw than a creek, but there's no water in it. But I knew as the sun would set, the thermals would start to fall from that oak flat down towards me, and knowing that, I knew that a buck would likely come in using those to his benefit, the wind and the thermal. And so, sure enough, literally, as the sun had set, we have a half an hour where I live from the sun setting time to to actual complete darkness. That's considered shooting light. And so if, like, say, if it's 7 p.m., then at 7:30 you're done. And so really about as soon as the sun set, I'm just going to use 7 o'clock as that time. I heard some noise down below me, and I thought it might be a squirrel, quite honestly. But when it came in, it sort of stopped and just was still for a while. And I didn't see anything, but I could hear it. It wasn't far. And then it made me think that it probably wasn't a squirrel after all. So then I would say maybe 7:15 is when it started to move again, maybe even 7:20, assuming that 7:30 is the last second of shooting light. So at that point, this buck started to move in. And he said he came in at just under 10 yards, I would say. And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I think that'll do." And I put an arrow in him, and I made a great shot. Used a Sever 2.0 titanium, put a nice big hole in him. Great blood trail. Actually drove home to get my son to help him, or have him help me trail. I knew that would give me a reason to get away from that deer and let him die. And so I went and got my son, and then we started the process of tracking. And I will say it was a lot of fun. It's always fun to involve your kids. He was super. At first he wasn't so sure about it because he wanted to get to bed. And then he was like, "This is a lot of fun, Dad." And the deer went farther than I thought it would. I actually, but he was going downhill, and eventually we found him. But the blood trail was fantastic, and he was, bleeding through his mouth and nostrils, as well as, through the 2 holes on his side. So plenty of blood. He helped me drag him out, which he was a huge help there. And I would I would say to you, as we move into late October and into November, that you've got this shift continues. Maybe it was, deer were focusing on, soybeans, and then the soybeans turned brown, and then they started focusing on acorns because the acorns are falling, like this buck that I killed. And now you need to continue to focus on the food in terms of where the does are, because where the does are is where you're going to find eventually the bucks traveling through. They're going to be traveling potentially perpendicular to the trails to cover as many trails as they can to find a hot doe. And understanding where that food is for the does, where the bedding is, because they don't necessarily move a whole lot, especially at this time of year, once they get settled in my opinion, from a food to bed standpoint. And then you're going to have your cruisers coming through. And so as we pivot into this stage, I would encourage you to hunt where the sign tells you to hunt, to spend your days scouting and not hunting. Because when you hunt, when you go into somewhere where you maybe, and maybe you have some experience in a particular area, piece of public land, or maybe, of course, if it's your personal lease or an ag piece, and the deer movement very specifically, then maybe it's not great advice. But if you are hunting public land and you're covering ground and you're trying to understand the movement, what I would do is really focus on covering that ground, maybe in a way where the wind is at your face. And if you do jump something, it didn't get your scent, and maybe it didn't fully understand what you were, but it knew you weren't a deer. And now you know where whatever it is that you jumped likes to bed. And now you understand where the deer are. And maybe you're seeing more scrapes and you're seeing lots of rubs, and now it's telling you to stop and set up. Because if you've hunted for years and if you've had difficulty punching your tag, I would encourage you to stop hunting where you think the deer are. Just because it looks like a good area doesn't mean it is a good area. And start scouting and hunting where the woods tells you to hunt. And I think you'll experience more deer, you'll learn more, and maybe you don't fill your tag that particular hunt, but you can begin to draw conclusions about, okay, now I understand the deer movement in this area. Maybe I need to move further back or further down or further up or further off, whatever that is. But that's what I would challenge you with this week, is really, as we move into the fun time, the Super Bowl of our whitetail season, is really, don't be afraid to bump deer, for one. And when you bump them, you've learned something. File that away. And maybe you don't kill that big buck this year, but you know where he is and what he likes, or where all these other bucks are, or where they like to bed. And then all of a sudden you have your spot figured out for future years. And then you can hunt close to that bedding next early October, if and assuming that buck likes to bed there based on that particular wind, etc. And all of a sudden you figured some things out that's going to help you next year. And then all of a sudden you start putting things together and killing bucks every year. So best of luck this season, and thank you for listening. If you want to find me on social media, it's J_Coons_hunts on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, where I have other forms of content. Best of luck. I look forward to connecting with you soon.